If sarcasm was currency, I'd be Bezos. That's what I told myself watching my wife Vera pack Victoria's Secret for what she claimed was a pharmaceutical sales conference in Atlanta. Red lace, black silk, the kind of lingerie that hadn't graced our bedroom in 18 months. The kind that screamed, "Impress someone new." "My boss needs me this weekend," she said, folding a negligee that cost more than my monthly electric bill. Drake Varron, her regional manager, the guy with the matte black Mercedes and the personality of a used car salesman who'd discovered cocaine. I'm Reid Trenner, 39, co-owner of Trenner & Associates Electrical Contracting. I wire buildings, not relationships, but even I could see the short circuit happening in my marriage. The signs were there, had been for months, but I'd been too busy keeping the lights on in half of Omaha to notice my own house going dark. Conference, huh? I leaned against the doorframe of our master bedroom, watching her stuff enough seduction into that suitcase to power a small city. Funny thing about conferences. Vera looked up, those green eyes that once made me forget my own name now calculating, measuring. What's funny about them? Well, they usually exist. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the screenshot I'd taken an hour earlier. Your company's event calendar shows the Atlanta conference was canceled 3 weeks ago. Email confirmations still in your trash folder. The pause lasted exactly 4 seconds. I counted. In electrical work, timing is everything. In marriage, apparently, so is lying. "Oh, that conference," she laughed, but it sounded like a wire stripping. Forced. Artificial. They rescheduled it. Last-minute thing. You know how corporate is. Right. Last minute. I nodded like I believed her. Like I hadn't already started making phone calls. Like I wasn't already 3 steps ahead in a game I'd just realized we were playing. Well, have fun with Drake. I mean, with the conference. Her face went pale for just a moment. A flicker. The kind of momentary power loss that tells you something's about to blow. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all, sweetheart. I smiled, the kind of smile I gave clients when they tried to tell me their wiring was up to code when I could see the fire hazard from across the room. Just that Drake seems to travel a lot for these conferences, too. Funny coincidence. Vera zipped the suitcase with more force than necessary. You're being paranoid, Reid. Drake's my boss. Of course we travel together sometimes. Sometimes. I repeated the word, tasting it. Like every Thursday for the past 7 months. The color drained from her face completely now. She knew I knew. The question was how much. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. I pushed off from the door frame. Well, I've got some rewiring to do myself this weekend. Might be good for both of us to work on our respective projects. I left her standing there with her suitcase full of lies and lingerie, walked downstairs to where my 9-year-old daughter Becca was building something elaborate with Legos at the kitchen table. My kid from my first marriage, the one relationship I'd managed not to electrocute. Hey kiddo, what are you building? A fortress, she said without looking up. With really high walls so bad people can't get in. Smart kid. Smarter than her old man, apparently. Becca, can I ask you something? She nodded, still focused on her construction project. You know how Mommy Vera goes on business trips sometimes? Uh-huh. Does Uncle Drake ever visit when I'm not here? Her hands stopped moving. She looked up at me with those serious brown eyes that reminded me of her mother, my first wife, who'd had the good sense to leave me before things got complicated. I'm not supposed to talk about Uncle Drake's visits. The words hit me like grabbing a live wire with wet hands. 3 years. 3 years of coached silence. 3 years of my own daughter keeping secrets because the woman I'd married had taught her to. Who told you not to talk about them, sweetheart? Mommy Vera said it would make you sad, and that Uncle Drake was helping her with work stuff, and that grown-ups sometimes have work friends that other grown-ups don't understand. I knelt down beside her chair, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're not in trouble, Becca. You didn't do anything wrong. But you don't have to keep secrets from me, okay? Especially not secrets that make you uncomfortable." She nodded, then went back to building her fortress. Smart kid. Walls were exactly what we needed. Upstairs, I heard Vera's heels clicking across the hardwood floor, the sound of her pulling her suitcase down the hallway. The front door opened and closed. Her Lexus SUV started up, the one I'd been making payments on for 2 years, and pulled out of the driveway. I waited until the sound faded, then walked into my home office and opened my laptop. Vera and I shared a password for everything. Trenner Forever 2019, the year we'd gotten married. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her laptop was still connected to our home network. Synced calendars, synced emails, synced lies. Amazing how technology makes betrayal so much more documented these days. The calendar entries were deleted from her phone, but they were all still there on the desktop sync. Dinner meeting, DV. Every Thursday at 7 p.m. for 7 months. Different restaurants, different hotels, same initials. Drake Varron. I scrolled through the entries, my electrician's mind automatically cataloging the patterns, the connections, the complete circuit of deception. The Marriott downtown, the Hilton by the airport, the boutique place on Dodge Street that charged $300 a night and didn't ask questions, but it was the email thread I found in her drafts folder that really lit me up. Messages she'd written but never sent, probably typing them out to organize her thoughts. Can't keep doing this. Reid's getting suspicious. Thursday was amazing, but we need to be more careful. What if he finds out about the company credit card? Company credit card. I opened a new browser tab and logged into my business account, pulled up the records for our corporate partnerships. Vera's pharmaceutical company was one of our biggest clients. We'd rewired their entire regional office 2 years ago. I still had access to their vendor portal. It took me 20 minutes to find what I was looking for. Drake Varron's corporate expense reports, hotel bookings, restaurant charges, travel expenses, all matching perfectly with Vera's conferences and client meetings. The pattern was beautiful in its simplicity, elegant even. Like a well-designed electrical system, every component serving its purpose, every connection deliberate. Except this system was designed to electrocute me. My phone buzzed. Text from Vera. Landed safely. Long day of meetings ahead. Love you. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Love you too. Hope the conference is everything you packed for." She didn't respond to that one. I closed the laptop and walked back to the kitchen, where Becca was putting the finishing touches on her fortress. "Looks good, kiddo. Really secure." "Thanks, Dad. Want to help me build the defenses?" "Absolutely." I sat down beside her, picked up a handful of Legos. "What kind of defenses are we talking about?" "The kind that keep out people who pretend to be friends, but aren't really." I looked at my daughter, this wise little person who understood betrayal better than I'd given her credit for. "That's exactly the kind of defenses we need," I said. We built until bedtime, constructing walls and barriers, planning strategies, designing systems that couldn't be breached by people who smiled while they lied. When I tucked her in, Becca looked up at me with those serious eyes. "Dad, are you and Mommy Vera going to get divorced?" The question hit me like a power surge, direct, unexpected, potentially damaging. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because you look at her the same way you looked at the bad wiring in Mrs. Peterson's house, like something that might cause a fire." Smart kid. Too smart. "I don't know yet, Becca. But whatever happens, you and I are going to be fine, okay?" She nodded and closed her eyes. "Okay. But Dad? Yeah? If you do get divorced, can we keep building fortresses?" "Every weekend," I promised. I went back downstairs and opened the laptop again. This time, I wasn't just looking for evidence. I was looking for leverage. Vera and Drake thought they were running a simple con, cheating spouse, oblivious husband, easy mark. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the electrician. In my business, when you find a short circuit, you don't just document it. You trace it back to its source, identify every component that's been compromised, and then you rewire the entire system. You make it better than it was before. You make it impossible for the same failure to happen again. And sometimes, if you're really good at what you do, you make sure the people who caused the short circuit get exactly the shock they deserve. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts, found the number for my lawyer. Tom Bradley, a guy who'd helped me through my first divorce, and understood that sometimes the best defense is a perfectly planned offense. It was 11 p.m. on a Friday, but Tom was the kind of lawyer who answered his phone when his clients needed him. "Reid, everything okay?" "No, Tom. Everything's about to get very complicated. But I think I'm going to enjoy watching it happen." Affair? Affair, corporate expense fraud, and about 7 months of documented evidence that's going to make this the easiest divorce case you've ever handled. I'll clear my Monday morning. Bring everything you've got. Oh, I will. But Tom? Yeah? This isn't going to be just about the divorce. I want them to understand exactly what happens when you try to short-circuit Reid Trenner. I hung up and looked around my house. Our house. The one I'd been paying for while my wife used it as a base of operations for her betrayal. The house where my daughter had been taught to keep secrets. The house that was about to become the command center for the most satisfying electrical work I'd ever done. Vera thought she was playing me. Drake thought he was getting away with something. They both thought they were smarter than the guy who works with his hands for a living. They were about to learn that the best electricians don't just fix problems, they prevent them from ever happening again. And they always make sure the current flows exactly where it's supposed to go. Monday morning came with the kind of gray October sky that makes you want to crawl back under the covers and pretend the world doesn't exist. I'd spent the weekend in my workshop, hands busy rewiring a vintage lamp while my brain rewired my entire life. Funny how both projects required stripping things down to their essential components and starting over. Vera had texted me twice from her conference. Updates about boring presentations and networking events, complete with a selfie in front of some generic hotel lobby. The kind of performance that would have been convincing if I hadn't already seen the script. I dropped Becca off at school and drove straight to Tom Bradley's office. Tom was the kind of lawyer who kept a coffee pot going at all times and understood that sometimes the best legal strategy was simply letting your opponent hang themselves with their own rope. "Show me what you've got," he said, settling behind his desk with a mug that read, "World's Okayest Attorney." I spread out the printed emails, the calendar screenshots, the expense reports, the hotel receipts I'd found in Vera's trash can. A complete electrical schematic of betrayal, every connection documented and verified. Tom whistled low. "This is either the most thorough case of marital espionage I've ever seen, or your wife is spectacularly bad at covering her tracks." "Little bit of both, probably." I leaned back in the client chair, feeling more relaxed than I had in months. There's something liberating about finally seeing the complete picture, even when that picture is ugly. "What's our play?" "Depends on what you want. Quick and clean divorce with a favorable settlement, or do you want to make this educational for everyone involved?" "Educational sounds good. I'm a big believer in learning experiences." Tom grinned. "Then we start with the company. Corporate expense fraud is a fireable offense at minimum, potentially criminal depending on how much money we're talking about. You said you have access to their vendor portal?" "I do. We've done electrical work for them for 3 years. I can pull Drake's complete expense history." "Do it. Everything for the past year. Hotels, restaurants, travel, entertainment. If he's been using company money to fund his affair with your wife, we can hand that information to their HR department and let corporate policy take its course." I pulled out my laptop and logged into the vendor portal while Tom made notes. The expense reports painted a clear picture. Drake Varron had been living well on the company dime, and most of his living had involved my wife. 11 months, I said, scrolling through the data. 47 separate charges for hotels, restaurants, and travel that correspond exactly with Vera's supposed business trips. We're talking about $12,000 in fraudulent expenses. That's felony territory in Nebraska, Tom said. But here's the beautiful part. We don't have to prosecute. We just have to document it and let his employer handle the situation. Most companies have zero-tolerance policies for this kind of thing. And Vera? Well, she wasn't the one submitting the false expense reports, but she was certainly a beneficiary of them. That makes her a witness to corporate fraud at minimum. Her company's going to want to distance themselves from this situation very quickly. I spent the next hour copying files, printing reports, and building what Tom called the most comprehensive adultery documentation package he'd ever seen. When we were finished, I had enough evidence to end 2 careers and 1 marriage. What's next? I asked. Next, you go home and act normal. Don't confront her, don't change your behavior, don't give any indication that you know what's going on. Let her think she's still in control of the situation. That might be the hardest part. It's also the most important part. The moment she knows you're onto her, she'll start covering her tracks and building her defense. Right now, she's still making mistakes. Let her keep making them. I drove home feeling like I'd just installed a new electrical panel. Everything properly labeled, every circuit protected, every connection secure. For the first time in months, I knew exactly where all the power was flowing. My phone rang as I pulled into the driveway. Carl Hendricks, my business partner, and the closest thing I had to a best friend. Hey, Reid, you got a minute to talk? Sure. What's up? Look, I don't know if this is my place to say anything, but I saw Vera at the Red Oak Steakhouse last Thursday night. She was with that Drake guy from her company. The Red Oak. Expensive place downtown, the kind of restaurant you take someone when you want to impress them. I checked my phone calendar. Last Thursday, I'd been working late on the Morrison Building project. Vera had said she was having dinner with her college roommate. Did they see you? I don't think so. I was at the bar. They were at a corner table. Reid, they weren't talking business. I mean, maybe pharmaceutical sales involves a lot of hand-holding and intimate conversation, but probably not. Probably not. I'm sorry, man. I debated whether to call you. No, I'm glad you did. Carl? Yeah? If anyone asks, you never saw anything. This conversation never happened. What conversation? Carl said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. But Reid, if you need anything at all, you call me, okay? I will. Thanks, brother. I hung up and sat in my driveway for a moment, looking at the house I'd been paying for while my wife entertained her boss at expensive restaurants. The house where my daughter had learned to keep secrets. The house that was about to become the epicenter of the most satisfying renovation project of my life. Inside, I found Becca at the kitchen table working on homework, her tongue sticking out in concentration the way it did when she was really focused on something. How was school, kiddo? Good. We're learning about circuits in science class. Oh yeah? What kind of circuits? The teacher said electricity always takes the path of least resistance. It finds the easiest way to get where it's going. I sat down beside her, struck by the cosmic irony of my 9-year-old daughter explaining electrical theory while I planned to redirect the current in my own life. That's right. But you know what happens when there's a short circuit? Everything stops working? Everything stops working the way it's supposed to. But a good electrician can fix it. You just have to find where the problem is and rewire around it. She looked up at me with those serious eyes. Are you going to rewire our family, Dad? I'm going to fix the short circuit, sweetheart. I promise. My phone buzzed with another text from Vera. Conference running late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. I showed Becca the message. What do you think? Should I respond? You should tell her you love her too, Becca said. Even if you don't really mean it right now. Smart kid. Smarter than both her parents combined. I typed back, Love you too. Hope you're learning a lot. This time, she responded immediately. Learning more than I expected. See you tomorrow. The honesty was almost refreshing. That evening, after Becca was asleep, I called the anonymous ethics hotline for Vera's pharmaceutical company. The automated system walked me through the reporting process, allowing me to submit documentation of potential expense fraud and policy violations. I uploaded everything: Drake's expense reports, the hotel receipts, the calendar entries, the photographic evidence Carl had helped me obtain by going back to the Red Oak and asking the hostess if she remembered the couple from last Thursday. She did. She also remembered that they'd requested the most private table in the restaurant and had seemed very familiar with each other. The ethics system generated a case number and informed me that all reports were investigated within 5 business days. Corporate policy required immediate suspension of any employee under investigation for expense fraud, pending the outcome of the inquiry. I went to bed that night feeling like I'd just completed a particularly complex wiring job. Every connection was solid, every circuit was protected, and when someone flipped the switch, the lights were going to come on exactly where they were supposed to. Tuesday morning, I was installing new outlets in a downtown office building when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Mr. Trenner? This is Janet Morrison from Human Resources at Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals. I'm calling regarding a report that was filed through our ethics hotline. Yes? The individual you identified in your report has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. I wanted to thank you for bringing this matter to our attention and to let you know that we take these allegations very seriously. What about the other individual mentioned in the report? Mrs. Trenner is not directly employed by our company, so we can't take disciplinary action against her. However, we have informed her supervisor that she may be called as a witness in our internal investigation. I understand. Thank you for following up. Mr. Trenner, off the record, the documentation you provided was extremely thorough. It's rare that we receive such complete evidence of policy violations. I'm very detail-oriented in my work. It shows. Have a good day, sir. I hung up and looked around the office building I was wiring, thinking about circuits and connections, and the way electricity always finds its way to where it needs to go. Drake Varron was about to learn that when you try to steal power from the wrong source, sometimes the current flows back in ways you don't expect. My phone buzzed with a text from Vera. Something weird happening at work. Drake got suspended for some expense thing. Probably nothing, but might be home late dealing with the fallout. I typed back, "That's strange. Hope it works out okay." But I was smiling when I sent it, because the current was flowing exactly where I'd designed it to go, and the real fireworks were just getting started. Vera came home Tuesday night looking like she'd stuck her finger in an electrical socket. Hair disheveled, makeup smeared, that particular kind of frazzled that comes from watching your carefully constructed world start to collapse in real time. "Rough day?" I asked from the kitchen table, where I was helping Becca with her math homework. Normal domestic scene, nothing to suggest that I'd spent my lunch break systematically destroying 2 careers. "Drake got suspended," she said, dropping her purse on the counter with more force than necessary. "Some anonymous complaint about expense reports. It's ridiculous." Anonymous complaint? I looked up from Becca's worksheet, the picture of concerned husband. What kind of complaint? Someone claimed he was using company money for personal expenses. They're doing a full investigation, going back months. It's going to be a nightmare. Well, I'm sure if he didn't do anything wrong, it'll get sorted out. Vera's laugh had sharp edges. That's not how corporate investigations work, Reid. They don't care if you're innocent. They care about liability and public relations. Even if Drake gets cleared, his reputation is ruined. That's unfortunate. I turned back to Becca's homework. Carry the 2, kiddo. Dad, why do grown-ups always make things more complicated than they need to be? Good question, sweetheart. Maybe they forget that the simplest solution is usually the right one. Vera shot me a look that could have powered half the city, but she didn't say anything. She went upstairs, and I heard the shower running for a long time. When she came back down, she'd recovered some of her composure, but I could see the cracks in the foundation. "I might have to work late the rest of this week," she said. "With Drake suspended, everyone's scrambling to cover his accounts." "Of course, whatever you need to do." But what she needed to do, apparently, was meet with Drake at a coffee shop downtown Wednesday afternoon. I knew this because I'd started tracking her phone, using the family sharing feature we'd set up years ago for safety purposes. Amazing how safety features can become surveillance tools when you need them to be. I didn't confront her. Tom had been clear about that. Let her keep digging the hole deeper while I documented every shovel of dirt. Thursday morning brought the call I'd been expecting. "Mr. Trenner, this is Janet Morrison again, from Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals. I'm afraid I have some additional questions about your report. I'm happy to help however I can. We've completed our initial investigation of Mr. Varron's expense reports, and I have to say, the evidence you provided was remarkably accurate. However, we've discovered some additional irregularities that we'd like to discuss with you." "What kind of irregularities?" "It appears that Mr. Varron may have been sharing confidential information about our drug trials with unauthorized individuals. We found evidence that he accessed restricted databases and printed sensitive documents outside of his normal work scope. I'm not sure I understand how that relates to my report." "Well, Mr. Trenner, we have reason to believe that your wife may have been receiving this confidential information. Our IT department found evidence that Mr. Varron forwarded several internal emails to Mrs. Trenner's personal account, emails containing information about upcoming FDA approvals and trial results." The room went quiet except for the sound of my brain recalculating everything I thought I knew about Vera and Drake's relationship. This wasn't just an affair funded by corporate expense accounts. This was insider trading. What kind of information are we talking about? The kind that could be very valuable to someone with pharmaceutical industry stock holdings. We're required by law to report potential securities violations to the SEC. I see. Mr. Trenner, I need to ask you directly. Has your wife ever discussed stock purchases with you, particularly stocks related to companies involved in our drug trials? I thought about Vera's investment account, the one she managed separately from our joint finances, the one she'd been particularly secretive about lately, claiming she was diversifying our portfolio with some professional insights from her industry connections. She has made some pharmaceutical investments recently, I said carefully. She said they were based on industry knowledge from her work. We're going to need documentation of those investments, Mr. Trenner. Account statements, transaction records, anything that shows the timing of her stock purchases relative to the information Mr. Varron had access to. I'll see what I can find. Mr. Trenner, you should probably consult with an attorney. This situation has expanded beyond a simple HR matter. I hung up and immediately called Tom Bradley. Reid, please tell me you have good news. I have complicated news. It turns out Vera and Drake weren't just having an affair on the company dime. They were running an insider trading scheme. Jesus, how much money are we talking about? I don't know yet, but Vera's been making pharmaceutical investments for months. She claimed they were based on industry expertise, but apparently Drake was feeding her confidential information about drug trials and FDA approvals. That's a federal crime, Reid. Securities fraud. We're not just talking about divorce court anymore. What does this mean for me? It means you need to distance yourself from this situation immediately. Document everything you can about her investment activities, but don't access her accounts or interfere with any potential federal investigation. And Reid? Yeah? It means your divorce just got a lot more expensive for Vera and a lot more favorable for you. I spent my lunch break in the parking lot of a construction site, going through Vera's investment account online. We'd set up joint access years ago for estate planning purposes, another safety feature that had become a surveillance tool. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Vera had made 17 pharmaceutical stock purchases in the past 8 months, each one perfectly timed to occur days before major announcements about drug approvals, trial results, or FDA decisions. The total value of her investments was over $40,000, and her profits were substantial. Every single purchase corresponded with a date when Drake had accessed confidential information at work. I printed everything, made copies, and drove straight to Tom's office. "This is a textbook case of insider trading," Tom said, reviewing the documents. "She's going to be lucky if she avoids federal charges." "What's my exposure?" "Minimal, as long as you can prove you had no knowledge of the source of her information. The fact that you're the one who reported the expense fraud actually works in your favor. It shows you weren't complicit in their scheme." "So, what happens now?" "Now we file for divorce and ask for full disclosure of all assets, including her investment accounts. We also inform the court that your wife is under investigation for securities fraud, which gives us grounds to request immediate asset protection to prevent her from hiding or transferring money." "And Drake?" "Drake's about to discover that federal prosecutors take securities fraud very seriously, especially when it involves corporate executives abusing their positions of trust." I drove home that evening feeling like I'd just discovered that the house I'd been living in was built on a foundation of lies. But at least now I knew exactly how deep those lies went and how to rebuild on solid ground. Vera was in the kitchen when I walked in, cooking dinner with the kind of aggressive efficiency that suggested she was working off nervous energy. "How was your day?" she asked without looking up from the stove. "Productive. Yours?" "Complicated. The investigation into Drake is expanding. They're looking at all kinds of things now." "What kinds of things?" "Email records, computer access logs, financial transactions. It's like they think he was running some kind of criminal enterprise instead of just padding his expense account." I sat down at the kitchen table and watched her cook, marveling at her ability to lie with such casual confidence even when her entire world was collapsing around her. "Vera, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Those pharmaceutical investments you've been making. Where exactly did you get the information that guided those decisions?" Her hands stopped moving. She stood perfectly still for about 5 seconds, then resumed stirring the sauce with deliberate casualness. "Industry knowledge, networking. You pick up information when you work in pharmaceuticals." "What kind of information?" "General trends, market analysis, nothing specific." "Nothing about specific drug trials or FDA approvals?" This time she turned around to face me, and I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. How much did I know? How much could she safely admit? How much could she still deny? "Why are you asking me this, Reid?" "Because I got a call from your company's HR department today. They seem to think you might have received confidential information from Drake. Information that could have influenced your investment decisions." The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might pass out. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Vera, they have email records. They know Drake forwarded you internal documents about drug trials and FDA decisions. They know the timing of your stock purchases. They're talking about involving the SEC." She turned back to the stove, but I could see her hands shaking. "I never asked for that information. If Drake sent me things he shouldn't have, that's his problem, not mine. Except you use that information to make investment decisions. That makes it your problem, too." "I need a lawyer." "Yes, you do. You need a very good lawyer." She turned off the stove and walked out of the kitchen without another word. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of our bedroom door closing. Becca appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by the smell of dinner and the tension that was now thick enough to cut with a wire stripper. "Is Mommy Vera in trouble?" "Yes, sweetheart. She's in a lot of trouble." "The kind of trouble that means we need to make our fortress stronger?" I looked at my daughter, this wise little person who understood that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. "The kind of trouble that means we might need to move to a different fortress altogether." She nodded solemnly. "Can we take the Legos?" "We can take everything that matters." That night, after Becca was asleep, I sat in my workshop and thought about circuits and connections and the way electricity flows through systems. Vera and Drake had built themselves a beautiful little circuit. Confidential information flowing from him to her, investment profits flowing back, corporate expense money funding their affair, everyone getting exactly what they wanted. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd forgotten that every electrical system needs proper grounding. Without it, the whole thing becomes unstable, dangerous. Eventually, inevitably, it shorts out. I was their ground fault, the safety feature they'd never planned for, the circuit breaker that was about to shut down their entire operation. And unlike them, I knew exactly how electricity worked. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that makes you want to believe in fresh starts and new beginnings. I was installing recessed lighting in a medical office, working with my hands while my brain processed the controlled demolition of my marriage, when my phone rang. "Mr. Trenner, this is Agent Sarah Mitchell with the Securities and Exchange Commission. I understand you've been cooperating with an investigation into potential securities violations involving your wife and Drake Varron." The SEC. This had escalated beyond corporate HR and divorce lawyers into federal territory. "Yes, that's correct. We'd like to schedule a time to interview you about Mrs. Trenner's investment activities and your knowledge of her information sources. Would you be available to come to our office Monday morning?" "I'll be there. Should I bring an attorney?" "That's your right, Mr. Trenner, but based on our preliminary investigation, you appear to be a witness rather than a target. Your cooperation in reporting the initial expense fraud has been noted." After I hung up, I called Tom Bradley. "The SEC wants to interview me Monday morning." That was fast. They must have found something significant in the preliminary investigation. "What should I expect?" "They'll want to know everything about Vera's investment activities, when she started making pharmaceutical trades, whether she ever discussed her information sources with you, and whether you had any knowledge of her relationship with Varron before you filed the expense fraud complaint." All easy questions to answer honestly. That's the beauty of being the one who reported the crime instead of committing it. "Reid, I have to ask, are you prepared for how ugly this is going to get? Securities fraud is a federal felony. If they decide to prosecute Vera, she's looking at significant prison time." I thought about my daughter being coached to keep secrets, about months of lies and betrayal, about the careful way Vera had manipulated everyone around her while building her profitable little scheme. I'm prepared for whatever happens. Good, because it's about to happen fast. That afternoon, I picked Becca up from school and took her to get ice cream. We sat in a booth at the local dairy bar, and I tried to figure out how to explain to a 9-year-old that her stepmother was probably going to be arrested. "Dad, are you and Mommy Vera getting divorced?" "Probably, sweetheart." "Because of Uncle Drake?" "Because of a lot of things, but mostly because Mommy Vera made some very bad choices, and now she has to face the consequences of those choices." Becca nodded thoughtfully, working on her chocolate chip cone. "In school, when someone cheats on a test, they get in trouble even if they don't get caught right away." "That's right. The truth always comes out eventually." "Is Mommy Vera going to jail?" The question hit me like a live wire. How do you explain federal securities fraud to a 4th grader? "She might, sweetheart. She broke some very serious rules about money and business. But whatever happens to her, you and I are going to be okay." "Can we still build fortresses?" "Every weekend." When we got home, Vera's car was in the driveway, but she wasn't in the house. I found her in the backyard, sitting on the deck with a glass of wine and a phone pressed to her ear. "I don't care what it costs," she was saying. "I need the best securities attorney you have." "Yes, I understand it's Friday evening. No, this can't wait until Monday." She saw me watching and ended the call. "Reid, we need to talk." I sent Becca inside to work on homework and sat down across from Vera at the patio table. Up close, I could see the stress lines around her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly as she reached for her wine glass. "The SEC called me today," I said. "I figured they would. Reid, I need you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen." "Which part? The affair, the insider trading, or getting caught?" "Any of it. It started as just information. Drake would mention things about work, about trials and approvals, and I thought, why not make some smart investments? Everyone in pharmaceuticals does it. Everyone in pharmaceuticals doesn't sleep with their regional manager and use confidential information to commit securities fraud." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." "What was it supposed to be like, Vera?" "I don't know. Easier, I guess. A little extra money, a little excitement. Something that was just mine." "What about us? What about our marriage? What about Becca?" "I thought I could keep it separate. I thought I could have both." "You can't have both. You can't build a relationship on lies and expect it to stay standing." She was crying now, but they were the kind of tears that come from self-pity rather than genuine remorse. "What happens now?" "Now you deal with the consequences of your choices. You hire the best attorney you can afford, you cooperate with the federal investigation, and you hope they decide not to prosecute you." "And us?" "There is no us, Vera. There hasn't been for months. I just didn't realize it until now." She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'll move out this weekend." "That's probably best." "Reid, I am sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am genuinely sorry." "I believe you. But sorry doesn't rewire the circuit, Vera. Sorry doesn't undo the damage." She went inside to pack, and I sat on the deck watching the sun set over the neighborhood where I'd thought I was building a life with someone I could trust. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of rebuilding that life on a foundation that couldn't be undermined by lies and betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text from Carl. "Heard through the grapevine that Drake got fired today. Something about federal investigators showing up at the office. You okay?" I typed back, "Better than okay. Justice is a beautiful thing when it's properly wired. Want to grab a beer and celebrate?" Rain check. "I've got some fortress building to do with my daughter." "Understood. But Reid?" "Yeah?" "I'm proud of you, man. Not everyone would have handled this with such class." I looked at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I'm an electrician, Carl. When I find a short circuit, I fix it properly. No shortcuts, no temporary solutions. I make sure it never happens again." That night, after Vera had packed her essentials and left for her sister's house, I tucked Becca into bed and sat on the edge of her mattress. "How do you feel about it just being you and me for a while?" "Good," she said without hesitation. "It'll be quieter, less secrets." "No more secrets," I promised. "From now on, everything's going to be honest and straightforward." "Like electricity?" "Exactly like electricity. It goes where it's supposed to go, it does what it's supposed to do, and when there's a problem, we fix it the right way." She smiled and closed her eyes. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, kiddo." I went downstairs and walked through the house that was now just mine and Becca's. It felt different already, cleaner somehow, like the air itself was easier to breathe without all the lies and deception clouding it up. My phone rang. Tom Bradley. "Reid, I just got off the phone with a contact at the SEC. Thought you'd want to know. They're moving fast on this. Drake's been arrested and charged with securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. He's looking at 20 years if convicted. And Vera, they're still deciding whether to charge her or offer her a cooperation agreement in exchange for testimony against Drake. Either way, her investment profits are going to be seized as proceeds of criminal activity." "How much money are we talking about?" "Based on the records you provided, about $60,000 in profits from illegal trades, plus penalties and interest. She's looking at owing the government close to $200,000. I whistled low. That's going to hurt. That's the point. The SEC doesn't mess around with insider trading. They want to make examples of people who think they can cheat the system. What about the divorce? With Vera facing potential federal charges and massive financial penalties, our position is extremely strong. We can probably negotiate a settlement that gives you the house, full custody of Becca, and protection from any of Vera's legal debts. That sounds almost too good to be true. It's what happens when you're the victim instead of the perpetrator. Reid, you played this perfectly. You documented everything, reported the crimes through proper channels, and kept your hands clean throughout the entire process. After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in my workshop, surrounded by the tools of my trade. Wire strippers, voltage testers, circuit analyzers, simple tools for solving complex problems. In the morning, I'd start the process of rebuilding my life. New routines, new priorities, new plans that didn't include accommodating someone else's lies and betrayals. It would be different, but different didn't have to mean worse. Better, actually. Cleaner. More honest. Like a properly wired electrical system, built to code and designed to last. I raised my glass in a toast to the empty workshop. Here's to short circuits, I said, and to the electricians who know how to fix them. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, promising a storm. But I wasn't worried about the weather. My house was properly grounded, my circuits were protected, and my foundation was solid. Let it storm. I'd built this life to withstand whatever came next. The SEC interview Monday morning went exactly as Tom had predicted. Agent Mitchell was professional, thorough, and clearly more interested in building a case against Drake and Vera than investigating me. I spent 2 hours answering questions about investment conversations, timeline details, and my knowledge of Vera's information sources. Mr. Trenner, based on your testimony and the evidence you've provided, it's clear that you were unaware of the illegal nature of your wife's investment activities, Agent Mitchell concluded. In fact, your decision to report the expense fraud ultimately led us to uncover a much more serious securities violation. What happens next? We're offering Mrs. Trenner a cooperation agreement. If she testifies truthfully about Mr. Varron's role in providing confidential information, we'll recommend reduced charges and allow her to pay restitution rather than face the maximum penalties. And if she doesn't cooperate? Then she'll be charged as a co-conspirator in a federal securities fraud scheme. Mr. Trenner, I have to ask, are you prepared for the possibility that your wife might go to prison? I thought about Becca, about the secrets she'd been taught to keep, about the months of lies and manipulation that had brought us to this point. Agent Mitchell, I'm prepared for whatever consequences result from her choices. That afternoon, I was back at work installing emergency lighting systems in a downtown office building when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Reid, it's Vera. I need to see you. Can you meet me somewhere? I don't think that's a good idea. You should be talking to your attorney, not me. Please, just for a few minutes. There's a coffee shop on Dodge Street near the medical center. I'll be there at 6. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. Tom had advised me to avoid contact, but part of me was curious to see how she planned to handle the complete collapse of her carefully constructed deception. The coffee shop was one of those generic places that tried too hard to look cozy and authentic. Vera was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a mug like she was trying to absorb its warmth. She looked terrible. Hair unwashed, makeup minimal, the kind of exhausted that comes from realizing that your entire life has been built on a foundation of lies and federal crimes. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down across from her. What do you want, Vera? I want to explain. I want you to understand how this happened. I understand perfectly. You had an affair with your boss, used confidential information to commit securities fraud, and lied to everyone about it for months. What's to explain? It wasn't supposed to go this far. It started as just attraction. Drake was charming, attentive, everything that you weren't. Everything that I wasn't? You're always working, Reid, always focused on your projects and your daughter and your business. When was the last time you looked at me the way Drake looked at me? I stared at her across the table, marveling at her ability to make her federal crimes sound like my fault. So you decided to have an affair. I decided to feel appreciated. The affair just happened. And the insider trading? Drake would tell me things, information about trials, about approvals. He said everyone in the industry used that kind of information, that it wasn't really illegal if you were just making smart investments based on professional knowledge. Except it was illegal, and you knew it was illegal. She looked down at her coffee mug. I knew it was risky, but the money was good, and it felt like we deserved it after working so hard in this industry. We? Drake and I. We were going to leave our spouses and start over together. The investment profits were going to be our nest egg. The casual way she mentioned leaving me, like I was just another obstacle to overcome, rather than a person she'd made vows to, hit me harder than I'd expected. What about Becca? What about her? She's part of this family, Vera. She's been part of our life for 3 years. Did you ever think about how your fresh start would affect her? She's your daughter, Reid. She was never really mine. And there it was. The complete absence of empathy that had allowed her to coach my daughter to keep secrets, to lie to everyone around her, to build her entire scheme on the assumption that other people's feelings didn't matter. You're right, I said. She was never really yours, because you never really cared about anyone except yourself. Vera's eyes filled with tears. That's not true. I cared about you. I cared about our marriage. No, you cared about the lifestyle our marriage provided, the house, the security, the cover story for your affair. You never cared about me. I'm going to cooperate with the SEC, she said, changing the subject. My attorney says if I testify against Drake, I can avoid prison time. Good. That's probably the first smart decision you've made in months. Reid, after this is all over, after the legal stuff is settled, do you think we could try again? Could we work things out? I looked at her across the table, this woman I'd married and trusted and built a life with, and felt nothing but pity. Vera, you committed federal crimes. You betrayed our marriage, manipulated our daughter, and lied to everyone who cared about you. Even if you avoid prison, even if you pay the restitution and rebuild your career, I will never trust you again. People make mistakes, Reid. Mistakes are forgetting to pay a bill or saying something thoughtless when you're angry. What you did was make a series of deliberate choices over months to deceive and betray everyone in your life. That's not a mistake. That's who you are. She was crying openly now, but I felt no urge to comfort her. The woman sitting across from me was a stranger who happened to look like someone I'd once loved. I should go, I said, standing up from the table. Good luck with your cooperation agreement. Reid, wait. I turned back. I am sorry. I know you don't believe me, but I am genuinely sorry for what I've done to you and to Becca. I believe you're sorry, Vera. I just don't think it matters anymore. I left her sitting in the coffee shop and drove home to find Becca at the kitchen table, working on a science project about electrical circuits. The irony wasn't lost on me. How's it going, kiddo? Good. I'm building a circuit that lights up when you complete the connection. That's called a closed circuit. When the connection is broken, it's called an open circuit, and the electricity can't flow. Like when someone cuts a wire? Exactly. Once the connection is broken, you have to repair it or build a new circuit entirely. She looked up at me with those serious eyes. Are you going to build a new circuit for our family? I think we already have, sweetheart. It's just you and me now, and that's a pretty solid connection. She smiled and went back to her project. I watched her work, marveling at her resilience and her ability to find stability even when the adults around her were creating chaos. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom Bradley. Vera's attorney called. She's signing the cooperation agreement tomorrow. Expects to avoid prison time in exchange for full testimony against Varron. Divorce should be finalized within 60 days. I typed back, What about the financial settlement? You get everything. House, retirement accounts, custody. She'll be paying restitution to the SEC for years and won't have resources to fight for assets she obtained through criminal activity. And Drake? Drake's looking at 15 to 20 years. His attorney is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the SEC wants to make an example of him. I put my phone away and looked around the kitchen that would soon be legally and completely mine. Tomorrow, I'd start the paperwork to remove Vera's name from the deed, the mortgage, the utilities. It would take time to erase all traces of her from our lives, but it was necessary work. Like rewiring a house after discovering faulty connections. You don't just fix the obvious problems. You strip out everything that's compromised and start fresh with components you can trust. Dad? Becca looked up from her circuit project. When my project is finished, do you want to see how it works? Absolutely. I love watching electricity flow exactly where it's supposed to go. She grinned and went back to work, and I sat down beside her to help. Outside, storm clouds were gathering, but inside our house, everything was properly grounded and protected. Let the storms come. We'd built something that could weather whatever came next, and for the first time in months, every connection was solid, every circuit was complete, and all the power was flowing exactly where it belonged. 3 months later, on a cold January morning, I stood in the courthouse lobby waiting for the final divorce hearing. The legal process had moved faster than Tom had predicted, helped along by Vera's cooperation with federal prosecutors and her complete lack of assets to fight over. Drake Varron had been sentenced to 18 years in federal prison the week before. The judge had been particularly harsh about his abuse of corporate trust and his exploitation of confidential information. Vera had testified against him, describing in detail how he'd provided her with insider information and encouraged her to make trades based on confidential drug trial results. Her testimony had been devastating and thorough. It had also been her ticket to avoiding prison time herself. "Reid?" Tom Bradley appeared at my elbow. "Judge Morrison is ready for us." The hearing lasted exactly 15 minutes. Vera wasn't present. Her attorney appeared on her behalf and confirmed that she was waiving all claims to marital assets in exchange for my agreement not to pursue damages related to her criminal activities. "Mr. Trenner," Judge Morrison said, "I'm granting your petition for divorce on grounds of adultery and financial misconduct. You are awarded sole custody of the minor child, full ownership of the marital residence, and all retirement and investment accounts. Mrs. Trenner retains responsibility for all legal debts and restitution obligations related to her securities fraud conviction." Just like that, it was over. 5 years of marriage dissolved in 15 minutes of legal procedure. "How do you feel?" Tom asked as we walked out of the courthouse. "Like I just finished a really complicated rewiring project," I said. "Everything's clean, everything's up to code, and I never have to worry about those particular short circuits again." That afternoon, I picked Becca up from school and took her out for ice cream to celebrate. "So, it's official?" she asked, working on a sundae that was bigger than her head. "It's official. Just you and me, kiddo." "Good. I like our fortress better without all the secret meetings and whispered phone calls." "No more secrets," I promised. "From now on, everything in our house is transparent and honest." "Like electricity?" "Exactly like electricity." My phone buzzed with a text from Carl. "Heard the divorce went through. Want to grab dinner and celebrate your freedom?" I typed back, "Rain check. I've got a date with my daughter and a Lego construction project." "Understood. But Reid?" "Yeah?" "You handled this whole situation like a professional. Not everyone could have stayed so calm and methodical while their world was falling apart." I looked at the message, then at Becca, who was carefully constructing the perfect bite of ice cream, hot fudge, and whipped cream. "Carl, my world wasn't falling apart. I was just discovering that what I thought was my world was actually someone else's construction project built on a foundation of lies. Now I get to build something real. What's the first project in the new world? I watched Becca attack her Sunday with the focused intensity she brought to everything important in her life. Teaching my daughter that honest relationships are like properly wired electrical systems. They're built to last, they're safe to depend on, and when problems arise, you fix them the right way instead of just covering them up. She's lucky to have you as a father. I'm lucky to have her as a daughter. That evening, we worked on a new Lego project. Not a fortress this time, but a house with big windows and an open floor plan. No hidden rooms, no secret passages, just clean lines and transparent connections. "This is better than a fortress," Becca said, adding windows to the second floor. "You can see everything that's happening." That's the idea. No surprises, no hidden agendas, just honest construction. As we built, I thought about the past year. The discovery, the investigation, the legal proceedings, the complete reconstruction of our lives. It had been painful and complicated, but it had also been necessary. Like any major electrical project, you can't just patch over the problems. You have to strip everything down to the foundation, identify what's salvageable and what needs to be replaced, and rebuild the entire system with components you can trust. "Dad?" Becca looked up from her construction project. "Are you going to get married again someday?" "Maybe, if I find someone who believes in honest construction and transparent connections. Someone who doesn't teach kids to keep secrets. Someone who understands that the best relationships are built like the best electrical systems, everything properly connected, everything up to code, everything designed to last." She nodded solemnly. "That sounds like a good plan." I thought so too. We finished the Lego house as snow began falling outside our windows. The real house, our house now, legally and completely, felt warm and solid around us. No more lies, no more deception, no more wondering what secrets were being kept in the rooms I wasn't allowed to enter. My phone buzzed with one final message of the day. Unknown number, but I recognized it as Vera's new phone. "Reid, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I'm starting therapy and working on understanding why I made such terrible choices. I hope someday you can forgive me." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Forgiveness might come eventually, but it wasn't something I owed her, or something she could earn through therapy and good intentions. Some circuits, once they've been compromised, can't be repaired. They have to be completely replaced with new components that haven't been damaged by poor connections and faulty installation. "Ready for bed, kiddo?" I asked Becca. "Can we leave the Lego house out tonight? I want to look at it when I wake up tomorrow." "Of course, it's your house. You can do whatever you want with it." She hugged me tight, and I realized that this honest, transparent, uncomplicated love was what I'd been trying to protect all along. Not the marriage, not the lifestyle, not the illusion of the perfect family. Just this connection with my daughter, this simple and reliable circuit that had never failed me. As I tucked her into bed, Becca looked up at me with those serious eyes. "Dad, I'm glad Mommy Vera's secrets came out. Even though it was sad and scary, I'm glad we don't have to pretend anymore." "Me too, sweetheart. The truth is always better than lies, even when the truth is complicated." "Even when it hurts?" "Especially when it hurts, because once you know the truth, you can deal with it properly. You can fix what's broken and build something better." She smiled and closed her eyes. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, Becca. Sweet dreams." I turned off her light and walked downstairs to my workshop, where I had a vintage radio that needed rewiring. Simple, honest work. Replace the old components, test the connections, make sure everything flows the way it's supposed to flow. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, covering the neighborhood in clean white silence. Inside, my house was warm and properly grounded, every circuit protected, every connection solid. I plugged in my soldering iron and got to work, thinking about electricity and honesty and the satisfaction that comes from building something that's designed to last. Tomorrow would bring new projects, new challenges, new opportunities to apply the lessons I'd learned about the importance of proper connections and transparent construction. But tonight, it was enough to work with my hands, to fix something that was broken, and to know that in the morning, I'd wake up in a house where every light switch worked exactly the way it was supposed to, where every circuit was honest and reliable, and where the only secrets were the ones my daughter and I shared about surprise birthday presents and hidden Christmas gifts. The kind of secrets that brought joy instead of pain. The kind of connections that made life brighter instead of darker. The kind of electrical work I'd always been best at. I finished the radio repair as the storm intensified outside, tested the connections one final time, and smiled as the old speakers crackled to life with clear, honest sound. Perfect. Everything flowing exactly where it belonged.